Good day to you. Would you like to see my beer can collection? Here they are. Aren't they beautiful? Almost all of them, to me anyhow, look like little pieces of artwork. These cans. Beautiful colors, designs. Most of those are from the United Kingdom. Most of those beers, I've drunk all of those beers, not at one time, all from England, all from the UK actually, Scotland included. And that's because I have a long history in the UK. I mean, my parents were British, my dad was Scottish, my mom was English. And I've got just lots of little pieces of the UK around my life here. Here's a small town in Scotland, a little fishing town. I got that over there. I got favorite band, the Rolling Stones. They're British. Over here on my bookshelves, I got a lot of Sherlock Holmes books, like this one, The Sign of the Four, which I read when I was young. And so I'm very happy today to talk about the United Kingdom, to talk about my ancestral homeland, if I can describe it that way, in terms of its media. We're going to be taking on British media today. I think that the chapter in the book does a really incomplete job in capturing some of the uniqueness of the British media landscape. I'm going to try and get that across. But overall, it's a very impressive landscape considering that the country itself is so small. So, especially when you compare the country of Britain to Brazil or the United States or China or Russia. I mean, it's a small country. And what exactly is the United Kingdom? What's it called that? Let's start off with some background information about this unique little set of islands. So, actually, when we talk about the United Kingdom, Great Britain, they're both referred to as, both terms are accurate. We're referring to three countries. We're referring to Scotland, we're referring to Wales, and we're referring to the biggest country, which is England. Now, some people also put Ireland, pieces of Ireland in there, pieces of Northern Ireland into the United Kingdom. That's up to you to consider, but the most common understanding is those three countries: Scotland to the north, Wales to the west, and England is in the middle and is much bigger and has the greatest population in the United Kingdom. Britain itself has the legacy of the British Empire. You know about the British Empire, right? You know that Britain sailed all over the world, that tiny little island with its fleet. Lord Nelson, I don't know if you know that name, defeated the Spanish Armada and defeated Napoleon's fleets and became the most important sea power in the world. And actually at one time, that little island controlled 1/4 of all countries in the world because it had colonized them. 1/4 or 25%, including such far-reaching places as Jamaica or Singapore or Australia, as well as places like the United States and Canada and lots of other places. England was all over the world with its mighty sailing fleet in the Victoria era. What you may also not know, though, is that Britain is the source of the English language. And the English language is the most popular language in media. It's the most popular language on the internet as well. And that means that out of all the languages spoken in television shows and films, newspapers, the most common language is English. And that is certainly true for the internet. So even though the language that's spoken in more places, by more people, I should say, the language that's spoken by more people than anybody else is Chinese, and even though the language that is spoken in more physical places across the world is Spanish, English reigns in mass media. And we can say that that's one of the advantages of having a language that's associated with your country. Is like Britain. It serves as a natural promotional tool for the country itself by virtue of every time you use the English language. That's not to say that Britain doesn't have other languages, though. It does. It has ancient languages, Celtic languages. You can find them in Ireland. You can find them in Scotland. And Britain does still preserve those languages in terms of road signs and in terms of local television programming that has to be in those languages. We referred earlier to Britain being no longer part of the European Union because of Brexit. It pulled out. It's its own island, its own economic entity now. Not to say that it doesn't have good relations with France and Germany and the other European countries, but it's basically thumbed its nose and said we don't want to be part of this larger quasi-governmental structure. And then lastly, in the introduction section, I just want to say what is truly tough to describe unless you go to Britain is how robust their entire media landscape is. It's incredible. When you look just at newspapers, for example, they have like 8 or 9 tabloid newspapers, which are still really popular today and are read lots of places. One thing that helps to understand why that is that in Britain you have a lot of people commuting on trains and on buses. That is a natural place to read a newspaper that you only have to open up here. And the content that's in there is not put online for free. You may get some, if you go to visit the Sun newspaper, you'll see a lot of typical British tabloid content, but there's a lot of content in British tabloids that you can only buy at the newsstand. When you get off that train, there's a newsstand right there. So newspapers are robust. Television is robust. Some of the most riveting, insightful, hilarious, edgy television I have ever seen in my life is British television. And actually there's a channel where I'll talk about it in a moment called Channel 4. It's chartered by the British government to push the envelope. That's the whole thing that it's supposed to be doing. And I remember watching a show, as distasteful as this sounds. It had a television mock news program that was delivering stories on pedophilia. Now, that's a really awful subject to introduce as an example of a television station pushing the edge, because of the vast majority of shows that come on that channel, Channel 4, that's the actual brand name of that channel, are not about pedophilia. They're more like Ali G. You know Ali G? Better known as Sacha Cohen, who plays Borat and is in a lot of other movies. He started out as a comic named Ali G on British television, and he was really pushing the edge with a lot of his humor. So television is robust too. Film is robust. We're going to describe that in a little bit. Film is really robust. James Bond is going around American theaters right now. The British film history is long and storied and very, very successful. And the internet, very robust in Britain as well. So you're talking about a tiny country that's kind of outsized in terms of what it produces around the rest of the world. Let's get into television. Let's talk about television. Television is ubiquitous. Most British homes is like 0.00001%. Only those homes do not have television. All the other homes in Britain have television, and most homes get their television from satellite. They're not getting it from cable, they're getting it from satellite television. The name of the service is Sky Television. It's owned by the News Corporation, which is the same corporation that owns Fox, the Fox network. They own a satellite distribution network. That's how most Brits are receiving television, but there is a free service there. This is typical with quasi-socialist countries. You don't find this in the United States. More capitalistic, quasi-socialist countries like Britain, they may not call themselves that, but they have something called Freeview. Freeview is where you can watch digital television for free. You need a set-top box, which the government provides you, and you can watch digital TV for free. And that's to make sure that nobody is economically disadvantaged, who is economically disadvantaged does not have access to television, because it's an important utility in the household to know about things and to learn about things and to stay in touch with your environment. So you get Freeview, which is free digital programming. You have only to apply to the government if you don't have funds, and you can get free television. Some of the famous shows that you probably already aware of that have been originally produced in Britain and then have become successful overseas are Doctor Who. It's really popular. I'm not a big fan of that myself. I've watched really much of it at all. It just doesn't appeal to me, the sci-fi genre. Tons of comedies are going around. Monty Python, as old as it is, still is well known around the United States for the kind of border crashing comedy that it did, Monty Python. But there's lots of other British shows that have made their ways across the pond into Netflix, streaming shows. Many of you have watched those shows. Couples might be one of them. The Office was originally a British sitcom. Britain just has a long tradition of television production. It's a very robust industry. There's a lot of money that's pumped into it from the government. They pump in money from that license fee. When you buy a television set in Britain, your name goes into a database, and then you have to pay about a $400 fee per year, and then that fee is collected and it's distributed to the BBC, and the BBC then is going to produce television programs that wouldn't be produced if they were up to commercial interests. Like, nobody's going to produce a television program, for example, on Alexander the Great, great military war commander who conquered the known world. Sounds pretty impressive, right? But nobody's going to be interested in that when you can watch something else with it's an action film, right? For the most part. I'm being facetious here to some extent, but there's some truth to it. However, telling the story of Alexander the Great is very important. It's very important to understand how a person could walk all the way from Britain to Egypt Do you have any idea how hard it is to walk from Britain to Egypt and conquer all the countries along the way? That's what was going on with Alexander the Great. The BBC is going to tell that story with a documentary following an actor as he walks from Britain to Egypt. And that's only because of the license fee monies are going to fund that. It's not going to be a profitable enterprise. And society hopefully is going to be better for it by learning about a piece of history and through the storytelling of television. And so that's the way that TV is somewhat different in the United Kingdom. There actually are 5 players. You've got the BBC, and the BBC is a dominant player. It's a public service television channel. It also has a radio service. And it is the most watched entity. It's got 2 channels. When you turn on British television, Channel 1, BBC 1. Channel 2, BBC 2. BBC 1, Channel 1 is very general interest. You can have sitcoms. You can even actually have American sitcoms airing on BBC 1. General interests. It's going to have soap operas during the day. It's going to have some news on there. Late at night, some comedians. Yeah, same thing in the U.S. BBC 2 is factual programming. It's strictly factual, so no fiction, right? We don't refer to our TV shows as fiction. We'll call them like sitcoms, but that's really what they are, fiction. We'll even call our reality shows reality, but they're not. They're fiction, most of them anyhow. And so the BBC 2 specializes in documentaries, sports, and does some high culture too. Symphonies, ballets, orchestras, painting. You can find that on BBC 2. The next channel that you come across is ITV. I know these are strange names, right? We're used to Channel 3, Channel 5, Channel 6, or W8. It's not the way that British channels are named. This next one is ITV, Independent Television. And that's a television channel that distributes programming according to regional content. So if you live in the south of England, you're only going to have programming that's related to people living in the south of England. If you live in the west, just programming for the west of England and so on. That's ITV. It's regional programming. Then you have Channel 4. I've already told you about Channel 4. Completely different name once again. By the way, the BBC, they're not running any advertisements. They're non-commercial, public service. ITV runs commercials. Channel 4 runs commercials. Remember, it's chartered actually to push the envelope of programming. And then the 5th major player in the whole thing is Sky Television. Sky is a satellite distribution network just like Dish TV here in the US, but it also creates content, provides content. And also you should know that there's a lot of expats, a lot of Brits who have moved out of Britain. They can't stand the weather, or they have a lot of contacts with people who were part of the former British Empire, family members in South Africa, for example. So a lot of Brits move abroad, and there are individual streaming services just for Brits, just so they can get British content, which they've got to have because they just love British content. It's so different from content anywhere else around the world. I guess you can say that about any country, but the feelings of affinity are particularly strong with British people. Now let's go into radio. And when we come to radio, one other thing about television I wanted to mention. I don't normally backtrack, but Britain is the second biggest exporter of television shows across the world. That tiny country exports more shows across the world than a France, than a Canada. Canada, big country. France has all those former French colonies. That's how robust British television is. And it also helps that English is the language of media because it makes those programs easier to export. Next we have radio. So Britain, like the other media that I've talked about so far, Britain has a very robust radio industry, and more than 90% of people are listening to radio at least once a week. And the average person is listening to radio, get this, 21 hours per week. 21 hours. That's 3 hours a day of radio. Now, to what extent is it on in the background? And you hear radio wherever you go. You'll go into a pub, and a radio station will be playing. How about that? You'll get in somebody's car, radio will be on. People love to listen to British radio in the morning. The morning shows, Top of the Pops, latest songs. The disc jockey's very fast-paced, witty. People love British radio in the morning, young people, old people, etc. British radio is dominated by the BBC. The BBC has many different radio stations, Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3, Radio 4, Radio 5. They're all different channels, all different networks. BBC Radio 5 just does sports, for example. But then you also have a strong commercial radio presence in Britain as well. You've got Virgin Radio, for example, formed by Richard Branson. Richard Branson is a multimillionaire, and he just sailed into outer space on behalf of Britain. If you know Richard Branson, Virgin Radio owns a lot of radio stations, but the BBC, with non-commercial radio, is a dominant player. And I just want to make sure that you know that means that the BBC does have a top 40 station. So if you want to listen to a WSBG, if you know that station from around Stroudsburg, it's a top 40 radio station. You want to listen to that kind of music. You want to hear the latest Bruno Mars, Taylor Swift, Drake song, or at least radio airplay Drake songs. You want to hear Nicki Minaj. You want to hear pop stuff. You can find it on a government-funded, it's a license fee, non-commercial radio station, which says, think of the big picture here, the British government is saying, hey, we don't want to just leave influencing young people's interests up to commercial businesses. They don't have young people's best interests in mind. All they're trying to do is squeeze money out of them, get them to purchase concert tickets, get them to purchase music, get them to buy anything that's advertised on the station. That's not their best interest so far. So government should be involved in that. Government should have a top 40 radio station to compete for people's interest just like every other station. It's a really interesting concept. And by the way, you don't find that only in Britain. You do find that in France and most of the other European countries. Now we'll finish up with film. Film is very robust. I know that you have seen many British films and many British actors over the years. Like I mentioned, James Bond is going around now. The James Bond franchise has been going around since the 1960s with Sean Connery. And now you have Daniel Craig, and it's going to be his last one. The next one, they're talking about making James Bond a woman. Maybe James Bond will become a black man at some point. But James Bond represents ideals of mystery and international intrigue and making love and being in high-priced, rich, luxurious situations. That's what James Bond represented, can appeal to any kind of person. It's uniquely created by the British film industry, as are many other films, some of which are tough to take, like Clockwork Orange, really tough film to take in the 70s, or Full Metal Jacket. These are some of the films. I don't think that, I'm sorry, that one is not a British film. You know, you've got your own British films I'm sure that you are aware of if you even have a mild interest in film. And the British film industry, in terms of spending, is soaring. Like the British talent pool that can create film is in desire by a lot of other people around the world. That's why Britain is very much involved in, and this is one of the first times we're using this word, and we'll be using it in other classes. They're one of the first countries to be involved in co-productions of film. Co-productions is where Britain is combining with the United States or France or Germany or Australia. They're combining those researches in terms of money and talent and production facilities and editing facilities, and they're making a movie. They're co-productions. They're not coming just out of Britain or out of the United States. So spending in general on film in Britain, particularly stimulating independent films, is rising. But co-productions are just one dimension that is rising because spending on film is also rising. And actually the UK, just that tiny group of islands, is the fourth largest film market in the world. When you talk about films that are consumed, Britain is the place that's fourth in line to the most consumed places where films are consumed the most. I find that pretty amazing, showing that they have a healthy, it's a healthy part of their repertoire to go to films on a regular basis, and you can do that in Britain very easily. Most people are living within their town or their village, and they can walk or they can take a bus and get ready. They don't have to get in a car and go to the movie theater. So, and also British houses are smaller. So even if you have a home theater, you're not going to have the American expanse with the L-shaped couch and the big coffee table in most British homes. So the movie theater has a different kind of appeal to Britain. And in fact, if you go to look at the offerings in British movies, you're going to see American releases in every offerings. By every movie theater, you're going to see American releases. Brits are as infatuated with American films as they are with their own films, just about. 26% of releases in the United Kingdom are from the U.S. So 1/4 of the films, that's a lot, right? Can you imagine 1/4 of any country's films being released as part of our overall releases in the U.S.? No, we just don't even think like that. But that's what's going on in Britain, despite having a really robust media industry. So that's going to wrap up our discussion of UK entertainment media. Have a great day.